Are we live? Okay. Seems like every time I try to go, it makes me restart for some reason. So sorry, I had to log off and then log back on. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late. Let me turn that background picture off so you guys can see me. Hello, Foundations people. Welcome to week 3. Hopefully you guys have been enjoying this so far. You got a little bit of me. You had a little bit of Megan so far. Now we're back to me. So again, chat option off to the right if you guys have questions and are joining us live. If not, if you join us later, you're probably going to get an email. We're going to set up kind of a question and answer session later on this week, but you can also just shoot us an email, reply to that link that we shared with you before we go live. So let's dive right in, guys. Usually at the beginning of week 3, we're kind of, a third of the way done. So we want to let you guys know that we're going to be throwing a lot of learning theory at you, a lot of sciencey stuff. Again, we think it's important not to just show the what and the how, but the why as well. We're big proponents of the why. So we're going to be throwing a lot of sciencey stuff at you. So again, we don't expect you guys to be perfect dog trainers by the end. I've been doing this for years and I'm far from perfect. I hate that word actually. So we're always a work in progress. So you're always learning new things. So we're going to be throwing a lot of stuff at you. So feel free to ask questions. That's what we're here for, guys. So don't feel like you have, if something's really nagging at you and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a stupid question, I should know this. Ask it, right? We may be able to frame it in a way that helps you better understand it, and then you can pass that information along to someone else who may be struggling with the same thing, okay? So questions are good. The important thing to remember is that you guys are learning the basics, and this is the foundation to which all of your training is going to be based on. So this is, this is not easy stuff. This is the hard stuff. So what makes training, as you get more advanced is just doing the basic stuff better and better, right? We talked about that on week 1. So that's a little PSA. Have questions, right? We don't expect you guys to be perfect. It's a lot of sciencey stuff. So definitely let us know if something doesn't make sense, okay? Second little PSA is I just want to kind of recap our golden training window, right? Our golden training time. The good news, you don't have to train for an hour at a time. Even though, some of us are swimming an extra time, your dog doesn't want to work that long. It's harder, especially if they're young. It's hard for them to focus for that long periods of time. And so, unless they're super duper working breed, come from working lines, they're not going to want to work that much in a row, okay? We want to interrupt it with lots of things. So they might have a meal, they might have a puzzle, they might have play sessions, they might have a nap, right? So you can certainly, work in an hour's worth of work in a day, but break it up. Don't do an hour long, right? For me, 10 minutes a day when you're training window to 8 to 10 minutes tops. All right. Some people even like to break it down into like 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there. I know my dogs are like that. They're bully breeds, they're boxers. So I always say that they're sprinters. They're not marathoners. So they definitely like to do a little bit at a time, not a whole lot because they get bored and antsy. Okay. So what you want to look out for, how do we know if my dog's bored and antsy or frustrated, right? We're going to start looking for those body language signals. Okay. So obviously if you have a fearful dog and they're scared of training, you'll see their ears go back, their tail be tucked. They'll be like, oh gosh, I don't want to look. I don't want to look at the clicker. I don't want to hear the clicker, right? If your dog is experiencing those kind of extreme fear body language signals, definitely let us know. Okay. But a lot of times they're going to be showing you what we call displacement behaviors, where they're not sure what the answer is, or they're confused and or frustrated, maybe both. Okay. And so these displacement behaviors can be something like practicing avoidance. So they won't make eye contact with you. They'll be looking everywhere but in your general direction. They might be holding the position and kind of staying with you, but they're like, oh my gosh, this question's too hard. I don't know the answer. I want to get my cookie, but I don't know the answer. So I'm just going to pretend like this is not happening to me. Right? We call that practicing avoidance. And then they might be showing you some puppy phone calls. And so that's where they kind of want to change the subject because it's too hard. They want to move on. Okay. So it might be like, oh, I got to scratch all of a sudden. I got to stop in the middle of what I'm doing and kind of scratch. Right. And you're like, oh my gosh, do they have fleas or if they have dry skin? Chances are it's a puppy phone call. Okay. If you see it a lot. Sometimes they might sniff at the ground. So just there's nothing on the ground. It's the same carpet or hardwood you guys have been hanging out in all day. Nothing's there. And all of a sudden they're very interested in whatever is on the floor. Okay. They might start digging at the floor, right? Again, just trying to change the subject, right? Because it's too hard. So they're frustrated, confused. So if you start to see those types of behaviors, it is a good idea to either take a break or stop working and try again tomorrow, okay? And there is no harm in that, guys. Just like us, these guys are going to have good days and they're going to have bad days. They're going to have days where they're focused and sharp and ready to go. And then it's going to have days, well, maybe they didn't get enough sleep that night. Maybe the baby was up crying and kept everybody up, right? Maybe they tweaked their shoulder and they're a little bit sore when you guys were playing fetch yesterday. Maybe they, ate their breakfast a little bit too fast and now they're feeling kind of woozy, right? Just like us, they can't, they can have good days and bad days, but they can't express, hey, I'm not feeling too good. Can we kind of take it easy today? It's going to show up. Those communication signals are going to show up in those kind of displacement behaviors. Okay. So pay attention to your dog. Don't think, oh my gosh, they're being stubborn, or oh my gosh, why can't you focus? Or they're being such a teenager. Some of that may be true some of the time, but be aware of what your dog's kind of normal ability to focus, ability to work. And so when they're not being normal, and you can kind of work backwards and say, I wonder what's going on. All right. So don't immediately jump to the conclusion where, oh, they're just being stubborn and they don't want to work. Let me push. Okay. Sometimes that can backfire on us. All right. So we spent the first 2 weeks. I like to really concentrate on your mechanics. So the human mechanics. So click equals treat. Click equals treat. Not fiddling with the treat pouch, right? Getting our timing down. So we make sure that click equals treat, that mark equals reward are 2 distinct events happening, and that we are not combining them or switching the order. Okay. So that's really important for our dogs to learn. And we don't do a lot of verbal commands, right? So we've been talking about capturing, right? Which is not giving our dogs something to do. It's waiting for them. It's catching them in the act for doing a behavior and then marking and rewarding them for that. And then last week we talked about luring, which is a lot of body language and marking and rewarding when they follow that lure. Okay, so again, we haven't talked about our verbal commands yet. The reason we do that is because dogs read body language first. That's their first language, okay? English is ours, so we immediately want to start putting words to it. Sit, 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 right? And we're like, why aren't you sitting? They don't understand what sit means, okay? So that's why we build the behavior first. And we start with what's easiest for the dog, because training is about setting them up for success. Okay. So why would I start with what's easiest for me, which is verbal English, right? I want to start from my dog's point of view, what's easiest for them. Okay. And we start with the behaviors that they already do naturally. So the sits and the downs, right? I always say they're not the sexiest of behaviors, but they are going to be some really important behaviors if you're doing tricks with your dogs. If you're going to teach your dog how to sit pretty, they better know how to sit well, right? If you want to teach your dog how to roll over and play dead, they better know how to lay down well. because you can't teach those without those first two foundational behaviors. If you're going to do competitive obedience or therapy work, their sits and their downs are going to be on all the prerequisite testing. So if you want to do the CGC test or any of the local therapy dog tests, sits and downs on command are going to be on there. So we start with what's easiest for the dogs, and then we add the layer of difficulty, which is today. We're going to talk about how to effectively introduce verbal commands, okay? So if you guys have questions, anything we've talked about so far, hit me up. I might take a little water break. Woo. All right. So we are going to talk about verbal commands today and how to introduce those effectively. But before we get started, we're going to talk about, and if I'm looking off to the right, I'm just looking at my little notes here. We're going to talk about some kind of tips and tricks and rules before we introduce those verbal commands. Okay. So the first one is we want to be consistent. We want to have everybody in the family that's involved in the training on the same page. Okay. So a nice example that I like to use is coming when called, right? If I say C-O-M-E, come, right? Mom needs to use that word. Dad needs to use that word. Brother, sister. And you all have to understand that that word equals what behavior, right? Coming when called, that means your dog stops what they're doing. They come and they sit in front of me. And that's what C-O-M-E, that's the basic definition. Make sure everybody is consistent in that basic definition, right? So coming when called, if I ask my dog to come on Monday and he stops what he's doing and he comes and he runs and sits in front of me, yes, there's your mark. Here's your treat. There's your reward. Okay, all done, right? There's your release, right? So we did that whole magic formula for C-O-M-E, and that was on Monday for come, right? That's our verbal command, verbal cue. I use those words interchangeably, cue and command. You may hear me use both. They mean the same thing, right? It's just a verbal information that's pairing a word with a specific behavior. So the consistency, I want to be as consistent as possible. So on Tuesday, if I say C-O-M-E, if I call my dog to come and he gets about halfway to me, and then all of a sudden out of the corner of his eye, he sees a squirrel and 90-degree turn. Oh, now I'm going to go chasing the squirrel. Now for him, C-O-M-E means, get halfway and then ignore mom, go chase a squirrel. So Monday come meant this, Tuesday come meant chase a squirrel, right? So we need to be consistent. So on that particular behavior, I'm not going to use C-O-M-E until I can enforce the behavior. So when I'm teaching recall, which we're going to talk about in week 6, one of my favorite lectures, so stay tuned for that, we want to be consistent in enforcing the behavior. So I don't use the verbal command C-O-M-E unless I can enforce the behavior. I can enforce that stop what you're doing, come sit at my feet, and I mark and reward and release you for that. Okay. It doesn't mean chase a squirrel. It doesn't mean ignore me. It doesn't mean, hey, there's a leaf blowing, go chase that one to the right. Okay. We want to be consistent in what the behavior means, what that word, what our verbal cue, what our verbal command, what behavior is paired with that, and that everybody in the family is on the same page. So anytime during training, you want consistency in your training, especially when we're adding a layer of difficulty like the verbal command. If you want confusion, if you want a frustrated dog, start getting your verbal commands all mixed up. Start having dad saying one thing, mom saying another, daycare saying one thing, vet saying another thing. Okay. You want to be consistent for their learning. Okay, it's going to make your training go that much quicker, and it's going to eliminate a lot of confusion and frustration for your dog, which is going to make them like training more if they're not confused or frustrated. Okay, questions? Be consistent. All right. Our second little tip or trick is one word to one behavior. So again, this kind of goes hand in hand with consistency. We want it to be as clear to our dog as possible. So I want one word, one verbal command, one verbal cue to equal one behavior. I can't have one word equals 5 different things because my dog is not going to be able to understand that. All right. So one of the biggest mistakes people make is when they're talking about, teaching your dog how to lay down. They will say lay down or down, right? So the dog kind of cues in on that DOWN word, right? That means put all your paws and your belly hitting the ground in a laying position. We can all kind of agree on that, right? We call that down. Where it gets a little tricky is when, I get home from work and my dog jumps all over me and I say, get down, right? Guess what? Your dog cues onto that word, DOWN. He thinks that means lay down. And then you want him to take his paws off of you and put them on the floor for get down, right? Those are the same word for 2 different behavior expectations, right? And so we want to make sure we have a distinct difference in verbal cues that we use. So if I want my dog's behavior to say paws 4 feet on the floor, I would rather use something like off. So get off, or just OFF, off by itself, right? Again, short, sweet, just like our marker. Verbal commands, I like 1 syllable, sometimes 2 syllables, that's going to roll off the tongue easily that your dog can really focus in on. So if I want them to lay down, I'll use down, body, 4 feet, lays on the floor, belly's on the floor. That's our down, DOWN. If I want my dog to get off of me, I'll say off, right? So 1 word to 1 behavior. That's going to make it crystal clear to your dogs with no confusion. And that's what we want. Last week we talked about luring, and you guys lured to the right and then you lured to the left in a nice little spin, right? For our dogs, from our dog's perspective, those are 2 different behaviors. So we need 2 different words for them. So spin to the right and spin to the left, even though they're 2 spins, one is in one direction, one is in the other. So from our dog's point of view, we really want to make sure that they have 1 word to the right and 1 word meaning left. Okay, so when you get to the more advanced stages of training, that's really going to come in handy when you only want them to spin in one direction and not the other, or vice versa. It really helps when you are teaching more advanced tricks, because sometimes you chain them together with all these different words, and you really want to make sure your dog is crystal clear on which direction that you're talking about. If I would just say spin, and that means right to the left, right and left, then my dog's just going to pick which one that they prefer, and they probably won't give you the other one. Okay, so it's just going to be confusing. It's a little bit muddy, right? I don't like muddy in my training. I like crystal clear, consistent. Okay, so 1 word to 1 behavior. All right, guys, questions on that one? So number 1, be consistent. Number 2, 1 word to 1 behavior. All right, guys, and sorry if you hear my dings in the background. If I mute my computer, then you won't be able to hear my mic. So last one, and it's the hardest one for us humans because we have this this bad habit, and I am guilty. So don't feel bad. So number 3, the hardest trick is never, ever, 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 ever repeat a verbal command. And I know immediately you're like, oh my gosh, I do that all the time. It's okay, right? We can fix it from now on. Now we know not to do it, right? And we're going to talk about why. So if you're thinking about a verbal cue from our dog's perspective, remember what they are good at. They are good at reading body language, and they're studying our face, our expression, our tone of voice. They're taking in the whole environment. This whole thing is part of the cue, including the verbal cue, right? So if I look at my dog and I say SIT, if I say sit, and they look back at me with 3 heads, right? We've all been there, and you're like, I know they know sit. Let me try it again. Maybe you're showing off to your neighbor. Hold on, they know the sit. sit. You know this, sit. And then maybe put your hands on your hips, sit, 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 right? And it just escalates from there. Maybe you get a little bit more growly. Maybe you get a little bit more scoldy. Maybe you step into their personal space with a little bit of spatial pressure, right? Think about it from our dog's perspective. All of that stuff is becoming part of the cue. So what happens over time is if we continually do this kind of escalation, our dogs are studying that. So they're actually paying attention like, okay, she doesn't really mean it until she does it about 7 times and then she puts her hands on her hips and then she kind of leans over me. That's when I really need to put my butt on the ground. And guess what? That means you have to go through that whole escalation in order to get to that SIT, to get that butt on the ground, right? I don't want to accidentally build all of that into part of the cue. I want to just ask for an SIT. I want to say sit once, and that's it. Okay? So what do we do if we say SIT and they stare at you back like, I don't know what you mean, right? We go back to the last step where they were most successful in that lure stage. Okay. And so that's when we'll get out a piece of food. We'll put it right in front of their face. We'll do that kind of lure up if we're doing a sit, lure down if we're doing a down, spin to the right, spin to the left if we're doing a spin and twirl. And we're only going to say that cue once. If they ignore you, that's when we go back to that lure. Then they sit. Then you're going to mark, reward, release. Even though you had to pull out a piece of food, that's okay. All right. We've already gone through that kind of dog and pony show, so they know what to expect. They know if they follow the lure, they're going to get that piece of food. Sometimes they need that extra motivation right in front of their face. Okay. And sometimes they don't know what SIT means. Okay. So we're going to show you how to know when they are ready to graduate to those verbal commands, because a lot of times when you get your dog looking back at you like you have 3 heads, when you ask for a specific behavior, it's because they don't know what to do. Okay, so they're confused. So they're not ready to add that verbal command yet. So probably the biggest mistake that people make in all of dog training, not just adding verbal commands, but they go too fast for our dog's capabilities. Okay, so we don't want to go too fast. So we're going to talk about how to know when our dog is ready for those verbal cues. All right. So before we talk about that, it's important to mention that this is another thing that dogs struggle with, is that they don't generalize well. Meaning you may be able to have a perfect sit and a perfect down and a perfect spin to the right and spin to the left in your living room. And then you go in the backyard and you ask for those same behaviors. And that's when you get those deer in headlight looks, or they start giving you those displacement behaviors, or they start running through their repertoire of other tricks that they like to do, right? All those behaviors mean they don't know the right answer. So they don't generalize. So remember I said they're constantly studying the whole environment, right? The whole environment is part of the cue. So if I'm asking for a sit in the living room and then I ask for a sit in the backyard, guess what? That environment has changed. So in our dog's point of view, that cue looks different, even though we're doing the same thing. So this is our sit, bend at the elbow. You guys can see me. Palm up, bend at the elbow, right? That's what sit means in the living room. But you change the environment and all of a sudden to our dog, that looks different. Not to mention there are smells and barks going on and people walking by and skateboards. So it's a lot more to take in, right? So realize that dogs don't generalize well. So they're not going to automatically know those behaviors that you teach inside the house well outside the house. And a lot of times that's the one of the biggest complaints that we have. Oh, my dog listens fine inside, but once I ask them to do stuff outside, it's like he doesn't know what I'm talking about, right? And so we may be going too fast for their capabilities. Okay, so we like to talk about that ahead of time so you guys realize that that is a skill that most dogs need practice with. They don't generalize. All right. Um, so how do we know if our dog is ready for a verbal command? All right. So we are going to do a little test for them. We're going to put them through a little test. So let's start with SIT. Let's start with sit, right? Our test we call a 4 out of 5 test, meaning if I take my food lure and I lure my dog to an SIT 5 times, okay? And 4 out of the 5 times they follow that lure and they immediately sit down. So no hesitation, no deer in headlights, no him and hawing and shifting around. They immediately, no hesitation, put that butt on the ground. If they hit that 4 out of 5 times, if we were doing percentages, right, that's about 80%. That's a B. That's pretty good. That means our dog has a really good understanding of what that lure means. So I have a good grasp of that behavior. Anything lower than that, when we talk about 3 out of 5 and lower, your dog is probably guessing, okay? And if they're guessing, that means they don't know, right? That means they're thinking about it too long, all right? It's okay if they wonder about it, but I don't want them thinking about it too long. I want them to know what I actually mean, okay, with that lure, okay? If they pass that 4 out of 5 test, if they're batting 80%, then they know that behavior pretty well. So we're able to identify that, hey, they know that behavior pretty well. They are ready to add a layer of difficulty on top, which is the verbal cue. The verbal cue, I want you to think about it as a layer of difficulty, meaning I don't want to put that on to my dog too soon, okay? I want them to have a really good handle on the behavior first, all right? So we play that 4 out of 5 test with the sits, with the downs, with the spins to the right and spins to the left. Okay. So if we were in class, we would do a little test right now. So you guys can take a moment and I want you to practice, take a moment at home, and you can pause this if you need to. I want you guys to practice this 4 out of 5 test. And so start with, when you're at home, I want you to start with the behavior that your dog is Hannah, I'm going to answer your question in just a minute. I want you to start with the behavior that your dog knows the best. So if they're really good at sit, start with this. If they're really good at down, start with down. Or if they're really good at spinning to the right and spinning to the left, do those first. Okay. And so I want you to play that 4 out of 5 test. And Hannah, it is with a food lure. So we're going to do what we did last week. Okay, so you're going to have your food lure and you're going to see palm up, lure, bend at the elbow, up for sit, food lure under your thumb, palm down, bend at the elbow, pull down to the ground, and then spin to the right, spin to the left for our lures for our spins. Okay, so we're not introducing the verbal commands yet. Okay, I only want you to practice that 4 out of 5 test. So can I lure that 5 times, and can my dog successfully achieve those behaviors 4 out of 5 times? If you were successful, guess what? You can start to add those verbal commands. All right. So Hannah, just to reiterate, so the 4 out of 5 test is with a food lure and with a hand signal. So it's going to be those 2 components, okay? In just a minute, we're going to add the 3rd component, which is the verbal cue. So right now, we're just doing the food lure and the hand signal, and we're going to lure that 4 out of 5 test, okay? So start with what your dog is most successful with. If they are really good at sitting down, but they haven't mastered spin or twirly or spin to the right, spin to the left yet, that's okay. You guys can work on that on your own time. All right. So take a moment and practice that at home. Pause this. And then we're going to get into how do we add that verbal command effectively. I'm going to take a little water break. Make sure I'm touching on all of my topics. Okay. think we started at 7:20, so I'm doing pretty good. All right. So once they have passed the 4 out of 5 test, you guys should be able to identify, okay, my dog is at 80% or higher. Some of these guys might get 5 out of 5. Perfect. Okay. If they get 5 out of 5, you know with confidence that they can do those behaviors, that they have a good understanding of those behaviors, right? So we are able to add a layer of difficulty. Okay. So, Jojo, you're in the way. Are you ready to work a little bit? Come on. I'm gonna get my dog up, and she'll give me a few sits. Maybe it's the end of the night, so she's a little bit tired. She's my 10-year-old lady. I know Patty. Patty's in the back whining. He wants to work too. So once you have identified that these guys are able to pass that 4 out of 5 test, then we're able to add that layer of difficulty, which is a verbal cue. So first I want to build the behavior. So my dog knows this hand signal and this food lure means this behavior. Okay. So then I can come in, and before I ask for the behavior, I can introduce a verbal cue, a verbal command first, and that's going to turn into a predictor of the behavior. So I'm first going to say SIT. I'm going to say sit, and then I'm going to use my food lure and my hand signal, right? Lure the behavior. That butt's going to hit the ground. I'm going to mark, reward, release. Okay? So in the beginning, we're pairing a verbal cue with a behavior. So we got to build the behavior first, then we come in and introduce that verbal cue. Okay? Let me see if she's got any juice left. You ready, Jojo? She's like, oh, I got some cookies here. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. So don't do it yet. Oh, good girl. Good girl. I'm just going to give her some warm-up cookies. So she's like, oh, yeah, I'm ready to work. So let's pretend that she has done the 4 out of 5 test. Can you guys see her? Uh-oh, can you see my hands? Sorry, guys. I might be bent over more than I normally am. So once she's passed that 4 out of 5 test, then I'm going to, right before the behavior happens, that's when I'm going to ask for that, give her that hand signal, and introduce that verbal cue. Okay. So right before the behavior happens, I'm going to say sit and then lure that behavior. And she's got bad arthritis. So let me get her on her bed so she's not slipping and sliding. Those of you guys who have old dogs, that's a nice, she's like, oh yeah, I'll sit now. Oh, she's like, down? Okay. Come on. All right, we'll do some spins. Oh yeah. All right, so I'm gonna say sit and then lure that behavior. Yes. Okay. Sit. Lure that behavior. Yes. Okay. She's like, I want to just sit and be lazy. Whoop. So right before the behavior happens, sit. Lure the behavior. Yes. Okay. So she is going to, over time, she is going to hear that word. Every time I hear that word, she lures with that hand signal and with that food lure. And so she is starting to understand that SIT equals that behavior. Okay. And so that's why a lot of people add the verbal first. Your dog doesn't understand what that means. We have to have a behavior to pair with the word first, and then they'll start to understand. It's that same Pavlovian learn by association. Mark equals reward. Sit means butt on the ground. Okay. That's how they learn. They learn by repetition and association. So again, if I say SIT and lure that sit, if I do it once, there's not as much learning. You have to have association and repetition. So you have to do it multiple times. All right. So same thing with down. Let me see if I can get on my knees. You can get it? Oh, and we just spilled the water. Here. All right, so sit. Same thing for down, down. Yes. Okay. And again, guys, she's 10, has arthritis, so she's lazy and doesn't like to get up. She just wants cookies. Sit. Yes. Deirdre, a cookie for Dad. Good girl. So again, let's say freebie. Let's say I say SIT, because at this point she doesn't understand what SIT means just by itself, right? Because we're still pairing the behavior. But again, if you ask for a behavior and they look at you with 3 heads, you're going to go back to that food lure. Okay? Down. Yes. Okay. So practice that release word, guys. So again, incorporating that release. This is going to be so important, especially in the next exercise that we're going to do. So they understand that, hey, I can get up from that position. You younger pups, they're going to want to get up, and that's actually going to be kind of a double reward for them. Her reward is just to sit down and I just feed her cookies all day, right? Should we have gotten your brother for this one? Maybe we'll get your brother for the next one. All right. Come on. Okay. Here you go. I know. She's like, what are we doing now? All right, guys. So if they are rocking and rolling, once we have several repetitions, remember they have to learn by association and repetition. So SIT or DOWN, those are predictors of us doing the food lure and the hand signals, okay? How do we make that harder, right? I don't want to have to feed my dog every time or do a food lure every time I want my dog to sit, right? So how do we make it harder? Okay, so once they have passed that 4 out of 5, we can do the same 4 out of 5 test with the food lure and the hand signal and the verbal command, right? So now we have 3 components. Food lure, there's food in my hand signal, right? And our verbal, SIT or DOWN, right? So if we want to make it harder, we're going to fade them out one at a time. The first thing we're going to fade out is the food lure. So I'm just going to use my hand signals, and there's no food in my hands. In the beginning, they're still going to get a food reward at the end from the pouch, okay? But we're not going to do that forever. But there's not going to be anything in my hand for them to follow. So it's kind of a risk that they're taking. Okay, am I going to follow this hand signal because it usually works? I usually get a cookie, but there's nothing in their hand right now. So am I going to try it, right? So you want to make sure that they get a reward at the end of that, because otherwise they're going to start to get suspicious, and it's like going cold turkey, right? Cold turkey usually doesn't fix behavior. Okay. So in the beginning, they need to still get a reward, even though we're fading the food lure. So they know, okay, if I work like this, I'm going to get paid off at the end. Again, we're going to show you how to fade that out. But the first thing we do is fade the food lure. Okay. And then once they get really good at that, where it's just sit, down, spin, twirl. And we're going to talk about, you guys have to figure out kind of what your verbal cues for the spins, right? So 1 word equals 1 behavior. So you guys have fun with it. To the right means spin. To the left means you can use twirl. You can use right, left, counter clock, or counter clock, mashed potatoes and gravy, mac and cheese. You know, have some fun with it, guys. Okay. So once they're really good with the verbal, and I really want my body posture to kind of be neutral. So I usually have my hands kind of at my stomach or at my waist or behind my back, and my legs are just kind of neutral. And then I can just say sit, down, spin, twirl. Okay, so it's just the verbal, right? So don't move to that next step until your dog is really ready for that. Okay. And of course, what we talked about before, if you want to make it harder, is you change the environment. Okay. So don't be surprised if you have to go back to the 3 components where we're learning sit, down, spin, twirl. Once we move to the backyard, we have to have all 3 of those components, even if on the inside of the house, we can just use a verbal. Okay. So remember, they don't generalize well. So when you're changing environments, it's recommended that you take some steps backwards. Okay. Now they're going to climb the stairs a lot quicker and they're going to be like, oh, I understand now. I know what you mean now. We're going to do the same thing that we were doing in the living room. Okay. I gotcha. And it's going to be you're going to be able to fade those out a lot quicker when you change environments. Most of the time, if the environments are not too distracting. Okay. So keep that in mind. So that's the order in which you're going to make the level of difficulty harder. Okay. So you're going to have 3 components: your food lure, your hand signal, and your verbal. To make it harder, you're going to fade the food lure. Then you're just doing the verbal and the hand signal. Once they get really good at that, you're going to fade the hand signal. Now we just have the verbal. Okay. So that's the order that I like. Some trainers may disagree, but I think that makes the most sense for the humans and the dog. Questions, guys? Concerns? All right. Say I might not run out of time tonight. Woohoo! Hopefully you guys were able to work. We're going to kind of totally switch gears. Hopefully you guys were able to. She thinks I threw a cookie in there. Maybe, I don't know. What are you doing? Hopefully you guys were able to play the Don't Touch My Fist game. If you were not, didn't have time to do that, I would play that game because it's going to be a nice transition game into the exercise that we're going to be learning next. Okay. So this is one of my favorite verbal commands because it is so versatile and it's so easy to kind of weave into our everyday busy lives without having to set aside a lot of time to really train with it. Okay, so it kind of comes up naturally just in our everyday interactions with our dogs, which makes it, for me, it just makes it easy to learn because it kind of comes up naturally where I don't have to set aside a lot of time for it. And that is the wait command. Okay. So in this class, we don't technically teach a formal stay, even though we teach a release word. So mark, reward, release. If I put my dog into a sit and my dog should understand that that is an implied stay until I release you. So we're not technically teaching a stay, but my dog should understand if they understand the release word. They should understand if I put you in a position, you're not to leave that position until you hear that release word. Okay? What are you looking at? What's in there? What is it? There's all the toys. I wonder if she has doggy dementia or what. I don't know. So it might be a bug or it might be a crumb. Who knows? So wait is a little bit different than stay. So they're similar in some ways and they differ in some ways. So I want to make sure that we talk about those differences. So for me, wait is very flexible. Stay in the training realm is very formal and doesn't have a lot of flexibility. So what are you doing? Yeah, I'm trying to work. Oh, it is a bee. See, it's a bee, everybody. She's trying to save me. Don't mess with that bee. It's a wasp or something. Oh, gosh. Hold on, guys. I gotta save nature. All right. Sorry, I wouldn't be able to concentrate because she doesn't normally get fixated like that. So I was like, something's up, and I didn't want a bug to buzz me. And it totally would have, because it was definitely like a yellow jacket or something. All right. Wait and stay. So for me, wait is a lot more flexible for your everyday pet owner, while stay has a lot of formalities. So in terms of differences, wait, the reason we don't play the don't touch my fist game is because wait is a closed fist. So it's no movement involved. It's just a closed fist right in front of my dog. So, I'm not punching them in the face or anything. It's just this as a hand signal. So that for me is wait, closed fist. Stay is open palm, right? So the hand signals are different. So wait and stay, hand signals are different. Where we are when we release our dog. So when you're talking about in the training realm for stay, you can put your dog in a sit, stay, down, stay, stand, stay. You can leave your dog, but you can't release them until you return to your dog and be right beside them, close enough to touch them in order to release them. Okay, so that's some formality in the training world. For wait, I can be across the yard, ask my dog to wait. I can be 50 feet away and can release them from there. Okay, so it has a lot more flexibility, meaning I can be anywhere when I release my dog. It doesn't matter. I don't have to be right next to them. Again, in the training realms for stays, you have to be right next to your dog in order to release them. And then basic definition, for me, wait is there's an imaginary line. You are allowed to cross it as soon as I release you, and I don't care what your body position is doing. So if you want to get excited and stand up, if you want to get tired and lay down, that's up to you, as long as you don't cross that imaginary line. Okay, so if I put you in a wait, at a doorway, as long as you don't cross the threshold, you can be in a sit, stand, stay, it doesn't matter, as long as you don't cross that threshold until I release you. For me, stay, if I put my dog in a sit stay or a stand stay or a down stay, they have to hold that position. So that's the whole idea with the stay, is that you can't get bored and lay down. You can't get excited and stand up and go sniff that thing over there or go say hi to that dog. You have to hold the position that I put you in. So I ask you to sit, and then I ask you to stay. I leave, I return to you, and then release. Okay, so it's a lot of formality. For me, wait, it's a lot more flexible. It's easier to teach your dog. They can still learn impulse control. They can still learn not to cross over that threshold. It doesn't matter what their body is doing, as long as they don't cross over that threshold until they hear that release. Okay, and so again, in order to be most successful with this exercise, you want them to understand the don't touch my fist game. If they're really good at that, they should be able to do this exercise relatively quickly, or get through this exercise relatively quickly. Okay, so we just covered all those verbal command rules. Wait and stay are going to break those rules. I know it's so hard, but I like to differentiate with those behaviors that we were talking about before. I like to call them kind of under the umbrella of stationary behaviors, meaning they do the behavior kind of in one little area and they do it once and it's over. So I ask my dog to sit. Once that butt hits the ground, they've done the behavior that I want. If I ask my dog to lay down, they lay down, they've done the behavior that I want. If they spin, if they twirl, that behavior is complete. They do it once and it's over, right? If I ask them to wait or I ask them to stay, right? This is an ongoing behavior. So that behavior continues until I release. So it doesn't end until I hear that release word. Okay, so if I put them in a sit stay, right, they're staying, they're still staying, they're still staying until I say, okay, all done, right? Same thing for wait. If I ask them to wait, they're still waiting, they still don't cross that line until I release them. All right, so for the ongoing behaviors, you are allowed to repeat yourself. I actually encourage you to repeat yourself. So if you like to talk to your dogs, this is you're going to like teaching wait and stay because you get to repeat yourself a lot. And so it's going to break those rules, meaning we're going to build the behavior and have the words at the same time, as opposed to the way we built it before, where we build the behavior first and then pair it with a word. The ongoing behaviors are going to break all the rules. They're just rule breakers. They are, right, Jojo? So we're going to introduce this wait command. Again, the dog understands from the don't touch my fist game that whenever I see this fist, that should encourage me to back away. Okay. And I want them to understand that for the same exercise. So if you want to warm up with the don't touch my fist game before you play this next game, I think that would be a great idea. Okay. So they understand that this fist equals, hey, back off. Okay. So this next exercise, our hand's going to be empty. So I'm going to present, I'm right-handed, so my left hand is going to be empty, but it's going to be that closed fist, that indicator, that physical indicator for my dog to be like, okay, if I back up, then I usually get the prize. All right. In this hand, in my right hand, is going to be the temptation. Okay. And I want to be right in front of my dog's face. Okay, so if I have a little dog, all right, I'm not going to be way up here in a chair. I might be better served on the ground with them. Okay, if I have a bigger dog, I can probably still be on the ground, but you can probably get away with being in a chair or on the couch as well. And you're welcome to stand up too. You're just going to be hunched over a little bit. The idea is to not be this high away from your dog, because this is not a temptation. I want to present them with something that they want, which is a cookie, and I want it right in front of their face so they can make a good choice. If they don't have access to this, if it's way up here, one, they're either going to jump, which we don't want to encourage, right? Or they're going to be like, oh, that's not that hard. I'll just sit here. And it's not really much of a challenge, right? They're like, there's no way I can get that. I'm 6 inches off the ground, right? So we want to present them with the temptation right in front of their face. So this should indicate, hey, back off a little bit, but they're faced with this temptation. So they have a choice to make. And we're not going to tell them what to do, except for this fist should be a little bit of a hint. Fist should be a little bit of a hint. And then we're going to introduce the word wait. Now, your dog doesn't understand what that word means yet. All it's going to be is whenever they hear that word, it's going to be a predictor of the behavior that we're trying to get out of them. Okay? So we're again breaking the rules. We're going to build the behavior and add the word at the same time, right? So here's my dog. I'm going to be the dog. It's going to be right in front of their face, right? Or you're going to be the dog, actually. So you're the dog. Here it is. Wait. Now your dog's going to see this temptation right in front of their face. Okay. Now they're going to have a choice to make. They're either going to go for it or they're not going to go for it. If they go for it, which 99.9% of dogs are going to do, you're going to go, if they go for it, you're going to pull your hand away and that food disappears. You're going to say, wait. As soon as they stop going for it, the food reappears. Okay. If they go for it, again, wait, food goes away. They stop going for it, food comes back. Okay. Wait. They go for it, food goes away. They stop going for it, food comes back. What does this look like? Sit. Now we're not telling them to sit. We're giving them a little bit of a hint. Okay. Right? So if we've been working on this, this is going to give them a little bit of a hint. So all I want them to do is back off, right? I'm waiting for a nice say please, if you remember that from week 1. The same thing for auto watch. And if you guys have been playing that, this should be, again, a nice default behavior. If they don't know what else to do, this is one where they have a strong reinforcement history, a strong learning history. I get cookies if I sit or lay down and look at my person's eyeballs. Okay? So wait, they go for it, food goes away. They stop going for it, food comes back. wait, food goes away if they go for it. If they stop going for it, food comes back. Now, if they don't go for it, but they're staring at it, right? They don't get the cookie, okay? That doesn't count. I need a sit or a down and eye contact. The reason is if they're staring at this cookie, we have no connection. They are not thinking about me at all, okay? I want eye contact to know, hey, hello, we're in this together, right? We're connected. As soon as we get a sit or a down and eye contact, you're going to mark. So you're going to yes or click. This is going to go away, right? So that wait command or wait hand signal is no longer there. And then you're going to release. Okay, now fight the urge to hand deliver that cookie, okay? The release is really important in this exercise because it's going to reinforce what release means. Release means you can break, you are allowed to break that position, okay? So I want you to move forward in order to get that cookie. I'm not going to hand deliver it to you, okay? So a lot of dogs will be like, oh my gosh, this is a trap. You're going to mark, you'll say yes, this will disappear, and you'll say okay. And they'll just look at you and they'll look back at the cookie and they'll look at you with worried eyes and look back at the cookie, right? Don't hand deliver the cookie. That's not a release, right? A release means you can break position. So you can oftentimes kind of point and say, okay, now you can get it. Okay, all done, right? But don't hand deliver. I want them to be able to get up, okay? In order to get their prize. Now, some dogs are going to be really good at this. Some dogs, especially, not to pick on you guys, but your teenagers, right? The younger dogs, they don't have good impulse control just from being teenagers. So it's going to take, it might take them a while. Okay. Now, if you're playing this game for a long time, so if you're playing and playing and playing and they're not getting it, you're going to see your dog experience some frustration, right? So they might jump on you. They might start to vocalize, right? So watch out for those body language signals that they're getting too frustrated. If they are where it's too much to handle, end on a good note, okay? Ask them to sit, something that they're really good at, something easy. Ask them to sit, give them that cookie and say, okay, all done, go play, and we're going to take a break, all right? Now, that being said, if they jump on you once in order to get the cookie, don't freak out and say, no, bad dog, off, right? We're never going to punish confusion. Remember, we're not luring them. We're not really telling them what to do. We're waiting for them to make a choice, okay? And if they jump on you, that just happens to be the wrong choice. It's not that they're being naughty. They're just trying to access the reward, and they chose the wrong way to do it. Okay. Now do that to a point, right? So if it's so frustrating that they're jumping repeatedly, that's when you want to take a break. But if they do it a couple times or once or twice, don't, reprimand them or scold them. We don't want to punish confusion because they don't know what to do yet. We're going to wait and try to reward that behavior that we do like. Okay, so I'm going to try this with JoJo. We haven't played this in a while, so who knows how this is going to go. All right, can everybody see her? It's kind of hard to see. I got a little bit of a glare going. All right, so she knows what wait means. So I'm going to show her this cookie. I'm going to say wait, wait, wait. Okay, good girl. Sorry, she had a little bit of gas there. That was embarrassing. See, it's a hard life for a dog, isn't it? But she did that pretty good, right? So she was definitely sitting, but she wasn't giving me that eye contact. So if you guys heard me, I did some little, and you can do that like we did in auto watch if they're sitting or laying down, right? But they're not giving you the eye contact. You can help them out and give them a little bit of a hint by making a noise to try to get their eyes. Be ready to catch them as soon as they get that eye contact because it might only last a split second. So be ready with your click. Be ready with your yes. And then you're going to mark that hand goes away. And then, okay, for them to go forward and get that cookie. All right. Wait. 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 So she's looking at the cookie. She's not looking at me. Wait. Wait. So she's trying different things. Yes. Okay. 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 There we go. See, we're a little rusty, but that's good. We're showing you how to do it. So you saw that went a little bit quicker than the first time, I think. So let's see if she can get it the third time. Wait. 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 Good girl. See, we got Drool City over here. All right. What a good girl. Okay, go play. And you hear Patty in the back like, I want to play. So that is your weight exercise. So again, some trip falls you want to watch out for is if your dog is getting too frustrated, it's okay to take a break, especially if they're young. This can be a little bit frustrating because we're not really helping them too much. We're waiting for them to make a choice, but you know what that means? What we talked about in the beginning is that it's going to be so much more profound if they make that choice and they get it and they get that reward. It's going to stick that much harder in their brains. Okay. So again, the reason I love weight is because it has so many applications. So if you guys are doing Kongs, or if you're doing food puzzles, or if you're doing meals in a bowl, all of those opportunities are perfect for weight. So once they have kind of mastered this exercise where they understand that whenever they see this and they hear the word wait, that means, hey, I got to back off. I got to sit or lay down and give eye contact, right? Once they understand that that's what that means, then we can use it for places like mealtime. So whenever my dogs are having mealtime, I'll say, wait. I'll put the bowl down on the ground, wait. And then once they wait, I'll say, yes, okay. And now you can move forward in order to get your meal or get your Kong or get your food puzzle. Okay, so it's just having just that little bit of manners, just saying, hey, I'm not going to die for this. I'm not going to jump and knock the bowl out of your hand because I'm so excited for my meal. It's just showing that little bit of impulse control where I don't have to just have everything right now. Okay. And so anytime we're doing meals or kind of a puzzle or a Kong or something special like that, I definitely incorporate weight. Okay. My dogs love the backyard. We just moved. They used to be country dogs. Now we're city dogs. So they love to go outside and hear what's going on in the backyard because it's so much more exciting than it used to be. So they like to kind of rush the door and rush past me, and it's just rude, right? So we've been really working on waiting anytime we go through a threshold. So an open door, anytime there's an open door, we say wait. I open the door, and then once they sit or down and give me eye contact, okay, now you can go through the door. They don't even need a treat. The reward is movement through the door, okay? And this is really important, especially if you're going on a walk, right? I don't want my dogs pulling me by the leash and rushing out the door to go, say hi to another dog or go pull to the squirrel or go pee on that mailbox immediately, right? I want some good manners. So I ask them to wait at the open door. I go out in front of them, and then they're able to, okay, now you can move forward through the door. I close the door, and now we can go nicely on a walk. One, it sets up the walk nicely because we're nice and calm, right? And I don't really subscribe to the fact that, like, if the dog goes in front of me in a doorway, that they're dominating me or anything like that. I just don't want them pulling me through a door because it's rude. It's not nice manners. And so I want them to be cognizant and understand what their body is doing, and not controlling the walk or controlling me when we're attached by a leash. I just think it's good manners to practice, right? My dogs are kind of weird. They love going to the vet. I hope your dogs love going to the vet. I love my vet. Shout out Hayes Barton Animal Hospital on Glenwood. My dogs love them because they have like 18 girlfriends that live there or that work there, and that come out and ooh and ah and feed them and love on them, and they just love it, which I'm glad about. But I am just one person. I have two, 50-plus-pound dogs. And so they're bouncing around and getting really excited. It's a very small parking lot. So I need to unhook their leashes or unhook their harnesses, put their leashes on. And so we practice a lot of weight in the car with open car doors, so nobody is rushing out to run up to the vet before I can make sure everybody's attached, and so I can make sure that it's safe for them to actually get out of the car, and that they're not going to be running out in front of the parking lot and get run over by a car. So a lot of weight is good for safety. It's good for manners. In the crate, right? I don't know about you guys. I have a wire crate. So when my dogs are in the crate, I've had fosters before, and they like to rush the crate. And so the crate door slams and knocks holes in the walls, and then slams back and hits the dog or hits me. And it's those wire crates. So they have all those pokey ends. So we practice weight when I was fostering with fosters when I open the crate door. So wait, open the crate door, wait. So they're nice and calm. I can get the door safely open. Yes, okay, now you can move out of the crate, and that's your reward. You don't even need a treat for that, okay? So I love weight because a lot of times you don't even have to incorporate food with how you're practicing, because the reward is breaking out of whatever position I'm in, okay? So I can move across that threshold. All right, so practice. Don't touch my fist first, then practice that exercise. Wait for that say please, that sit or down and eye contact. Mark, this disappears, release, and they get their reward. And then start utilizing it around your house, right? See if you can find some ways to incorporate weight into your everyday life, and you're going to see your dog really start to have some nice impulse control, okay? So just because something's right in front of you doesn't mean you dive for it. More likely than not, if I kind of hold back and I give you eye contact, maybe I'll get a prize, okay? Next week, guys, is loose leash walking. So that's usually the lecture where we get the most questions. So think about your questions. Let us know if you have questions about verbal commands, how to effectively add them, and practice your weight. Okay. Let us know, and we will see you. What's today? Thursday. Today's Monday, but we'll see you Thursday. Bye, guys. Have a great night.